Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday with Walton and Reis for February 5th, 2025. You can see in the background, I'm here in sunny
Hmm.
Jupiter, Florida at the beach. And unfortunately, Kyle's stuck back in cold St. Louis. Sorry, Kyle.
Yeah, it was worth it, I guess, as long as somebody's happy.
All right. So, as you know, every week we come to you in video form here at the cardinalnation.com and in audio form at the Scoop Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are in the news. Certainly, one of them is Jim Edmonds' comments about the organization and about his employment or former employment. Also, talk a little bit about the roster construction and where we are right now in terms of spring training and whether the Cardinals roster is set or should be set. And then finally, a couple of the national ranking services, ESPN and The Athletic specifically, have come out with their national farm system rankings. As you remember last week, those of you who listened last week, Kyle and I talked about where the Cardinals players stood in the national top 100s, but now we've got a numeric value for the Cardinals system, along with some words to go with the music. So we'll touch on that as well. And anything else that comes up, depending on how crazy Kyle gets today.
We'll see where it goes.
All right. So Jim Edmonds, color analyst for Fox Sports Midwest, then Bally Sports Midwest, and I guess he never made it to FanDuel Midwest. His services are no longer required by the organization, and Jim had some parting comments about that. I guess it's not really clear whether it was a mutual separation or what it was. I could certainly come up with a scenario that says where everybody's trying to cut costs because the Cardinals' rights fees dropped by what, 30%?
Yeah.
Jim Edmonds may have been the highest priced talent, maybe after Chip Carey, that they had, that maybe they decided they couldn't afford him. I don't think it was Jim Edmonds' comments, although, he wasn't a pushover for anybody. His style, there were people who liked his style and didn't like his style, but kind of what do you think about the overall decision that Jim and the network parted ways?
It was interesting to hear Mr. Edmonds talk about how it all transpired for him to say that he had started to think about not coming back, avoided a call, and then called back to tell the broadcast team that he would not be a part of it, only for them to say that, well, we weren't going to bring you back anyway. So it's nice that it's mutual. At
Kyle,
least
Kyle, Kyle, you can't break up with me. I'm going to break up with you first, right?
yeah, exactly. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna before anybody else can say anything, I'm gonna let you know, Brian, I'm breaking up with you.
Exactly.
Even though you just told me. Yeah. So I guess which is really, Brian, you nailed exactly what I was gonna get into. Is we have to remember that this is all one person's perspective on things. Um, there's been situations in my life where things that I used to enjoy, I don't enjoy anymore. And it's not necessarily because of what's going on with that thing. It's just how I've changed and evolved. And one of the things that I really took from Jim Edmonds' comments in particular is he talked about kind of also just being tired and worn out. A conversation he had with his wife where, he might only have 20 years to live. And, he was talking about being on a farm in Tennessee and just trying to get the most out of life with maybe not the drama. And he just sounded a little beat up, and a little bit more, um, with a little bit more self perspective, a little bit more introversion than someone like Jim Edmonds normally does. There's been a lot of stories about how he's talked with TLR, communications with TLR. How he's always been one to be a little bit more emotional, a little bit more fiery. And as someone who has a little bit of that in himself, and then once you get a minute to like relax and think back, it's easy to get caught up in both the emotions, but also the wear and tear that comes with being overly emotional sometimes. So my takeaway is, yeah, he kind of bagged the organization a little bit, but he's also just beat. He's done, and he's ready to get out of the public spotlight. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I think that's a very good from the angle of why Jim Edmonds, the person, decided to a career change was right for him and for his family. It's just I have to admit that it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, the way that he went about it. I mean, he's got a red jacket. He's going to wear a red jacket forever. He's going to be riding, in the parades and all the festivities as a Cardinals Hall of Famer, as he should be. Um, but he got pretty specific about things that were happening that he didn't like, and I'm not sure that that puts anybody in a positive light, him
Yeah,
or them.
and even thinking about the opening day stuff, like they asked him if there was a chance that he would pass up on opening day, and he said, as of right now, I probably would pass up on the opening day festivities. And that does make it about you. Like that puts it in perspective that it's not necessarily about Cardinal Nation or how you feel about the organization. It's a very, in my opinion, and I don't know Mr. Edmonds from a hole in the wall, but it's kind of a selfish way to handle things because opening day is for the players, of course, it's for the coaches, it's for ownership, but opening day is for the fans. It is a holiday in the greater part of the Midwest, Southeast, and Western expansion areas. So
I hope he reconsiders that, and maybe that was a spur of the moment answer. But the question of whether the organization is embracing its history and bringing back former players. Certainly, there are former players in minor league camp. I've seen down here in Florida, Jason Isringhausen and Ryan Ludwig play a more prominent role than I've ever seen them play before in terms of coaching minor leaguers. There's also something to be said about making sure that what former players, when they're brought in, what they're saying and how they're teaching it compared to what the organization is trying to do with their own coaching. And so it requires some synergy that may or may not always be there.
yeah, especially if you have a rogue personality, the last thing that you might want, the last thing you would want is so many different cooks in the kitchen, right? Yeah, especially if it's all about messaging. Now, I really don't feel like I have a side here. I definitely would like to hear the Cardinal side. I would like to hear them kind of come out and talk, but also at the same time, if I was in the Cardinal situation, I wouldn't say a word. I would just let this die down, let this become a story. Maybe somebody asked me about it somewhere down the line, and I can just say, uh, not they're not all former players feel the way that Mr. Edmonds does. He feels that way. Maybe some other players have, but like you said, we've brought in Daniel Descalso, we've brought in John Jay. Yeah, we have a laundry list of former players that are still a part of the organization, and others who still want to be a part of the organization. But you know, when you step back too, Mr. Edmonds talks about it not being fun anymore. Well, and then there used to be legends around. Well, so many legends have passed over the last 5 to 6 years that would greatly change the dynamic of camp and who's coming and who's I guess enriching the Cardinal atmosphere. So it's really interesting, and boy, it really took us by storm on a Monday morning, didn't it?
Yeah. And we don't have the schedule out yet either. It'll be interesting to see. The Cardinals had been somewhere in the 12 to 15 spring training games televised. And it's very unusual now that we're well into February that schedule has not been shared. And, obviously we have to cut them some slack given the bankruptcy proceedings and all the churn they've had. But hopefully we'll get to see the Cardinals a lot on TV this spring, at least those of you who aren't here. Sorry to rub it in again.
It hurts.
Uh, um, to that end, let's talk a little bit about the roster. And of course, John Mozeliak's priority 1, 2, and 3, as he told us back in winter warmup, and that is trading Nolan Arenado. Bregman doesn't have a home yet. Boris is still holding out. But at what point in time do you say, hey, I have to set my team. I have to get my guys in camp and get organized. We're less than a week away from pitchers and catchers reporting. And by my count, there's at least 10 major leaguers down here already getting ready for the season. How do they resolve that issue?
Yeah, and as we're talking it over right before we went live, John Morosi was on Twitter saying that he's been told by a source that the Cardinals and the Red Sox have had recent trade discussions involving Nolan Arenado. He doesn't get into detail. He stays pretty glib about the details, as sometimes he can. But he kind of, in his tweet, he mentions that Arenado could affect Bregman's market, where all we've heard is how Bregman
the other way
is
around. Yeah.
Exactly. So I thought that was really interesting. Maybe some propaganda there, maybe some, agent push, who knows? But to your point, if it were me and I were the Cardinals, this would be about the time where I'd be sitting down with Nolan and probably saying, look, this just is what it is. Like, you're a St. Louis Cardinal. We have to lock it in. We have to do a little bit of damage control, and we have to be ready to go into the season this way, which is tough. And we'll stay open minded. We'll see what becomes available. But I think for everybody, including the kids, the coaches, the last thing I would want if I was running the organization or a coach in the organization, I wouldn't want going into pitchers and catchers reporting and then full squad workouts, still not knowing what's going to happen with Nolan Arenado, or not having a plan. Like, all right, having to deal with two plans going into spring training sounds like a nightmare to me. One with Nolan Arenado, one without. I think that, Brian, today is a great day to pick for
which way you gonna go.
That's it, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I'm of the same boat. That's why I brought this up. It's just, you know, if they're really waiting for Bregman and Boris, then they're not in control of their own destiny, right? And they're letting someone else decide their agenda for this year. And at some point, you got to say, okay, Nolan, we couldn't work out a trade that was acceptable to us and to you. Therefore, you're here until at least the July 31st trade deadline. And at that point in time, let's talk again, see where we're at. But we're going to shut all this discussion off now, all this noise. You're a St. Louis Cardinal. Do what you can to help our team win this year.
Yeah, and it's not like that closes opportunities for Walker and Gorman. The truth is their roster would be the exact same as it was entering the 2024 season. Pitchers withstanding, but it's not like this was going to create like a real opportunity. All this does, and I guess we'll find out as spring training goes along, is all this means is that Lars Nootbaar is going to have to play center field to make the other opportunities kind of work around it. So it's not like it's damning to the organization and their plan to create opportunities for Gorman and Walker specifically if he does come and they do have him in camp and they plan on keeping him until further notice. So yeah, that's how I would be too, Brian. I'm glad you brought it up because that's exactly what I've been thinking. Like, I mean, maybe you give it the weekend. Maybe you say if we get past this weekend, just because weekends are fun little arbitrary deadlines, right? Like, yeah, oh, the weekend, just like January 1st, or we're working out. Didn't work for me though, to be fair. But no,
Resolutions are made to be broken.
thank you. Unless your resolution is to break resolutions and then you stick with those. No, but so yeah, maybe use the weekend, but I would not going into Monday of next week. There's no way that I wouldn't have made my mind up about what this is. You can't continue to let the market dictate your moves anymore this close to pitchers and catchers.
And in terms of position players down here already, really the outfield, both center fielders, former center fielder, current, I don't know, Siani and Scott are both here, working hard. Jordan Walker's been down here. Of course, he moved down here. Matt Koperniak's here. Brendan Donovan's here. I just saw him for the first time today, taking infield practice from his knees. I mean, it's just, these guys really put the effort into it. On the pitching side, Michaelis has thrown. I've seen Michaelis throw 3 bullpens already. He's on a
Wow.
Monday. He's on a Monday, Friday routine, and he's throwing. I didn't count, but 60, 80 pitches. So I
Wow.
mean, he could start a spring training game tomorrow, I suspect.
Yeah.
Matt's Zach Thompson, John King. So there's a lot of folks now trickling into camp, and before you know it, hopefully we'll be seeing Cardinals baseball on TV.
Yeah, your pictures of and comments on the website of Miles Michaelis, and you're like, this is the third. At one point, putting it together, you're like, this is the third time I've seen him throw a bullpen, and of course, he looks like he's in great shape, and he seems to be getting along really well with Pedro Pajes. So
Well,
I'm
we'll have to
excited.
see.
Yeah, that's it. I was just gonna say I'm excited.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how it. I'm not going to do any best shape of his life stories. I promise. You'll have to find those somewhere else. But Michaelis looks good. But who knows? Till you they're not thrown to live hitters yet. None of them have thrown to live hitters. So that is yet to come. But it's still only February 5th. So all right. So the last topic in our session this week on Wednesday with Walton and Reis is what some of the national folks are saying about the St. Louis Cardinals farm system. This last few days. Keith Law, who is now with The Athletic, put out his farm system rankings. And Keith Law has the Cardinals 14th of 30 organizations. A couple of days prior to him, Kylie McDaniel from ESPN had the Cardinals at number 19. And so that's obviously in the bottom half, right around the bottom of the second third. You've had a chance to look to see what these guys wrote. What's your take on their take?
Well, with Kylie McDaniel in particular, I think one thing that stood out to me that I really liked is, he gives his 100 through 200 prospects. And, Yairo Padilla, the big time Dominican prospect, teenage kid, Leonardo Bernal, and Jimmy Crooks, and then Cooper Jerpy were all in that 100 to 200 range. And
Surprisingly, Sajasi was not, as I recall.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure that out too. Maybe because of the Major League Service time, but that doesn't make sense either. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. I like that those guys are getting the publicity that they should. And then
And
you know, as far
that could play into his ranking as well. Given the depth of the system is something that goes. Usually they look at the top tier of prospects and say, okay, and they don't think as much about those guys that are on the periphery. But let's face it, at this point in time, some of those guys may turn out to be better than the guys that are in the top 50.
yeah, yeah, and that's again, I eventually, Brian, people are going to come after you because I keep bringing him up, but like that's where I'm at with Cooper Jerpy. I think that's why I have a little bit extra respect for Kylie McDaniel's list as compared to maybe some of the other lists we've seen. Again, I am a Cooper Jerpy honk. I think what he does is something so unique and so different. So it's nice to see that at least somebody on the national scale hasn't given up on him as he's dealt with arm issues, regardless of his first round a first round pick pedigree that he has. So I really like that. I did not dig so heavily into Keith Law's list as I did to Kylie McDaniel's. It was just timing more than anything. And also, I was really interested in the prospects 100 through 200. I always end up being more interested in that than the first 100. So, but when you look at the list, I think that the prospects that keep getting brought up, the three, Weatherholt, Matthews, and Hentz, are all in appropriate areas. I am surprised, and I was thinking about this more since you and I talked last week, Brian. I am surprised that Tink Hentz continues to get the publicity that he does. I just think back to all these years where the Cardinals will have a prospect who gets hurt, and then you'll see that guy just fall off of a top 100 list. So I don't know if that means that people still think extremely highly of him, regardless of the injury issues and the innings problems, or if it's just you keep putting Tink Hentz on the list because you forget about him. But I thought that was a positive.
His stuff, just keeps blowing people away, and it's so dynamic. You're willing to, lean a little bit into the wind, I would say, on the injury questions. Back to Jerpy, I did talk to him and asked him about last year. Was there an injury? Was there a procedure? Was there anything? And he said no.
Yeah.
As opposed
Yeah.
to 2023, where you had those, loose bodies. Left elbow. Loose bodies removed from his elbow. So, he basically said last year was precautionary. He's already throwing bullpens. Looks good. There are no restrictions. Now there's a group of guys that are rehabbers, who are off to the side doing their things. And that Dukavich and Alec Willis, who's probably never left the rehab group in his career,
Yeah.
and several others like that. But Jerpy doesn't have any restrictions at this point, so he's looks like he's ready to go.
That's exciting. That's exciting. So, what about you? Were there any takeaways from when you saw Keith Law's list or Kylie's list that surprised? Any of the wording was anything?
Well, I guess the one statement about right now it's a big pile of prospects who will get to the majors, but maybe not as impact players, and that was part of the reason I think that rating was 19 from McDaniel rather than 14 like Law, and so the feeling and it's sort of the history of the Cardinals really when you think about it, it's quantity maybe more than necessarily top quality, but as long as a number of those guys who aren't considered maybe potential impact players become impact players at some point, everything's cool. Because
Yeah.
as much as we'd like to say prospecting is an exact science, it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't. And if you have enough horses in the race, somebody's going to win.
Yeah, that's it exactly. One of the areas that we've talked about a little bit, Brian, is we keep talking about all the pitchers and JJ Weatherholt and pitchers. My interest in Austin Davis aside or Chase Davis aside, like there really aren't a whole lot of position players in the organization. So you understand where some of that criticism is too, where you might have a difference of opinion on where the prospects are placed.
Yeah, when I was down in the fall league, I talked with a scout, and I won't say what organization he was from, but I asked him his opinion of the Cardinals system, and he said prior to them drafting Weatherholt, he didn't see a single player in the Cardinals system that he thought had the capability to be a long-term major league starter. And maybe
Yeah.
this guy was just down on the Cardinals. I don't know. Maybe he was a former employee that I don't know. But
Yeah.
it was pretty damning considering the focus the Cardinals had put on position players for a number of years that led up to Walker and Wynn and Gorman and et cetera, for that to be called. And maybe that's a reason, along with the fact that Weatherholt was a potential top one or two talent that fell to 7, why they went that way. It'll be so interesting to see, what they do this year with that pick in the first
Yeah,
round.
it's been a while since I've had a prospect break out. Brendan Donovan, Alec Burleson. Although Alec Burleson was a 70th overall pick, so that doesn't really count. But it's been a while since they've had, and that group of hitters have graduated to the majors. So it does stand to reason that they would have a block here, maybe a hole in the organization of hitting. But last year, Nathan Church got off to such a hot start and then fizzled out. There were a couple. Noah Mendlinger is a contact guy. A couple hitters here and there. Dakota Harris, who
All
made
three of them are down here not right now, by the way.
awesome. See, that's good. We like to see that. But other than like, I guess Jimmy Crooks is really the only one who kind of outkicked his prospect coverage or pedigree this past season. So it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting idea. I think the Cardinals have more than that. But like you said, it's not an exact science, and that's part of why we do this because it's fun to watch and see who rises to the top.
Yeah, speaking of catchers, I just want to, since you mentioned Jimmy Crooks gets a lot of marks for his leadership and his rapport with other people, whether they're coaches or the pitchers or whoever it is. A guy that I've seen, and this first time I've ever been around him, Ryan Campos took last year in what was around, Kyle? Was it
Seventh,
seventh
I
round?
think. Yeah.
Sixth or seventh round there. He seems to be melding in very, very well. Looks more like a veteran than a guy in his first camp. The only thing is he's a little undersized. I mean, he's not as big as Jimmy Crooks. He's not as big as Bernal for sure, who's the biggest of the group. But the other guy who's over, and I can't remember if I mentioned this last week. If I did, I apologize. But Rainiel Rodriguez, the young man who hit so well in the DSL, he's here as well. And that says a lot that the organization, and Padilla's not. I'm assuming Padilla is going to come over this spring, but we haven't seen the list for step camp, and
Yeah.
that'll come out soon. But that Rainiel Rodriguez is here in the U.S. already, 9 months, 10 months after he signed is a good sign. And the catching group looks as a whole very strong.
Yeah, I saw some of the pictures you posted of Rainiel, and he looks pretty well built. I have to correct myself about Campos real fast. He's a fourth round pick. It was a
Fourth
fourth
round.
round. I blacked out. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
It's because in my mind he's a contact guy who hits the ball on the ground, and I was usually they don't take that early in the draft, but they think they can get him off the ground a little bit, and that'll help. But it's really interesting. There's an interesting dynamic there. Like we know Pages has that little bit of leader in him. Jimmy Crooks has been much talked about, and then as you brought up last week with Ray Rodriguez and Leo Bernal kind of pairing up, there's some leadership there, and then so to hear that Campos, and we had heard about this from his days, down at Arizona State, that he was one of these guys who is a leader. Again, character leader first at the catcher spot. Another thing that you pointed out in your articles is like the extra help that Jose Oquendo has. I was really interested in that. Like, I hadn't thought of it that way, even though I knew that they were bringing on more instructors and everything. But like,
A coach
it's
made that comment to me, by the way.
oh,
No, that
okay,
wasn't one I divined, although it's true. But I mean, Jose Oquendo is the one constant, right, in terms of Cardinals instruction. But just to show you, he always is busy. The other day, Jordan Walker and Victor Scott and Koperniak were taking fly balls in the outfield. Okay, and Jose Oquendo walked out and stood on the outfield track and is constantly talking to them while
wow,
their balls are hitting them and make their break. Now, Jose Oquendo, of course, was an infield. He played in the outfield because he played everywhere. But the point is, the guy now has a weight off his shoulders that he doesn't have to do everything with everyone. There's a catching coordinator now, Ethan Goforth, who's very active with the catcher, so he can just focus on those guys. There's a field coordinator where there wasn't one for a number of years. 2 pitching coordinators. There's a lot more teaching there than there ever was before. And in these early camps, they also have selected members of the minor league staffs. So a couple of the minor league pitching coaches, a couple of the minor league hitting coaches, even a couple of the fourth coaches are around and helping as well. So I've never seen a higher teacher to student ratio than there is so far this spring.
yeah, and that's come across in the pictures too. That can only be good. I was just that note in particular about Oquendo, I think, was more eye-opening for me than just seeing the coaches list or seeing pictures of coaches or seeing the instructors and the amount of like that was the anecdote where it really clicked to me, other than just the words that have been said about how short-staffed everything was. Like you're just so used to Jose Oquendo being able to do everything and he can still do everything, but just thinking about what it unlocks for him to have a lieutenant to help with these things, especially as step camp is right around the corner as pitchers and catchers report. And I know Okendo will be more over there, but he's still going to be there. He's still going to be there to help, and it allows for that synergy that the organization has seemingly been missing for a couple of seasons now.
Yeah, by default, Okendo was more or less the coordinator. I mean, he didn't have that title necessarily, but I seen him spend a lot of time with Ryan Barba, who is the new field coordinator, and it's not as if he's checking with him, but they're talking a lot, and there's a lot of collaboration. So these early camps are as much about the coaches getting to know each other and work together than it is them getting to know the players. I thought the players would all have numbers and uniforms on, numbers on the back of their names on the back of their uniforms, so the coaches could figure who they are. But they're doing really well knowing who's who, even better than me sometimes.
That's great. I love it. I love seeing Mr. Day interact with Mr. Mozeliak. It's just everybody is kind of all on board from what you posted and what we're hearing. And what more could you ask for as you enter spring training?
As I go back to as we pull this together, I go back to the Arenado subject. Mozeliak has been on the field the last 4 days in a row on with this early camp, and I've never in all my years I've never seen him spend that much time on the backfield. Maybe it's a quiet time, but I'm always looking out of the corner of my eye when he steps aside to get on his phone to see if that's the call where he goes, yeah, we finally made the trade. Hasn't happened yet.
That's what we need. We just need to maybe I'll come down there and I'll just videotape him try to get that reaction if it ever happens.
Yeah, we'll have a secret mocam.
Yeah, the great, perfect.
Well, we're at 30 minutes, and that's about the goal for these calls each week. I've had people tell me they'd like them longer. I've had people say, can you not do video so I don't have to look at you? I've had all kinds of reactions, but I will say the reactions overall have been much more positive since Kyle joined, and that's nothing against our prior co-host, but Kyle, you've been a great addition to these, and I look forward to doing with you every week.
Yeah, especially, well, look, we're 2 weeks away from everything being hot and heavy down there. And I cannot wait to talk over the progress of the prospects and the major leaguers with you in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Kyle. And a couple of things going on at the Cardinal Nation. You do not have to be a paid subscriber. In fact, if you're not a paid subscriber, come on over and register, have a contest for the first Cardinal player to hit a home run at home this spring. And it has to be at home because one of the changes to Roger Dean Stadium is that the outfield fences have been moved in. And that's to accommodate the bullpens, which for safety reasons have to be put off the field of play for Major League Baseball. So I thought it'd be fun to have a contest to give away a free membership for a year to the person who picks who's going to hit the first home run and on what home game will that home run be hit. So swing by the Cardinal Nation, that's free. If you want to spend a little money, get some good information, of course, you can subscribe and also get a copy of our 2025 prospect guide, 256 pages of information, 60 prospects, a lot of history, great information, available in PDF and printed book form. And even though I'm in Florida, books are being sent out as they're ordered. And if you order the PDF, you'll get it the same day. So
Brian,
with that, Kyle.
if I can, I'm sorry. I got my hands on that PDF last week, and it is a thing of beauty. Like I've been looking through it nonstop, pulling it up. I love it. I know it seems like I'm trying to peddle a product, but you can't go wrong with it. It's beautiful. It's well done. And it's a must have for prospect people.
Thank you. I've been doing it now for 7 or 8 years, and feel like I've kind of got it down to a groove swing now. And the goal every year is to have it out by the time the first players get to Florida. So you can get it right now. It's fresh, and something that if you have it, on your mobile device, you can take it with you to the ballpark as you see these prospects and you want to get into a little more about the grades of their tools or whatever it may be. You can do that with the Cardinal Nation 2025 Prospect Guide. With that, we will close for the week and talk to you again on the 12th of February.